Stay with us. So let me come back to Mark Osborne. So Julie, let's go back to some of the basics and the starting of this. So Mark is in jail for what? Initially, he's in jail. Why is he in jail?
It was a Section 20 without intent. He had a row with some doormen in a club. They started on him. It was accepted in court that he didn't instigate the crime, and it was accepted, that it was without intent. What happened afterwards?
So how long did he get in jail?
3
What was that
years.
sentence? How many?
3.
Okay. And so whilst he's in jail, the allegation is that he had a smuggled in phone and used that to order the murder of Mark Treddinik. Is that correct?
That is, I mean, what I can say there is, what it is, there was the night before the murder, Mark made one 7-minute telephone call, one 7-minute call. That was it. There's no other calls between him and his codees for the month before the murder. So one 7-minute call the night before the murder. He was actually speaking to his friends in the pub. He was passed around the pub. But according to the prosecution, in that 7 minutes, he arranged the murder of Mark Treddinik. However, the 2 co-defendants had been in touch with each other for the last couple of weeks, and they'd actually tried to get the co-defendant there the day before. The girlfriend has made a statement saying they tried to get him there the day before. The cell mask signals show them at the murder scene the day before and calling Mark Treddinik and asking him to meet them. Had Mark Treddinik gone there the night before and it had taken place the night before, Mark could have had no knowledge, no anything, because he had no contact with his codees whatsoever. People need to understand something. Though Mark and Tony are brothers, they grew up separately. Mark grew up with his mum. Tony grew up with his dad. They led separate lives. They had different social circles. Everything. I mean, they accused Mark of being a drug dealer with his brother Tony.
Okay, let me just stay with a chronology, because I think it will make it much easier for everyone to follow what's going on. So in relation to that phone call that happened the night before, that was a phone call that was made on a smuggled in phone. Is that right? Or was it on the phone from the prison? Okay, so it was a smuggled in phone. So he had a smuggled in phone, and he phoned. Who did he phone that night? Tony. He phoned
Wayne Collins. Wayne.
Okay. So he phoned Wayne that night.
Brother.
Okay, so he phoned Wayne that night, and it's the following day that Mark Treddinik is shot.
Yes.
And he's shot. It says the reports, obviously, and what came out in court, that he was shot 9 times. What did the pathology say?
The pathology, as I say, said that the experts, there was umpteen there was quite a lot of wounds, obviously, because yourself, bullets ricochet. There was 9 track wounds, which they tried to say indicated the 9. But the person that examined the ballistics, etc., Nathaniel Carey, his name was, he actually stated that after examining the ballistics from the victim and the cartridges, he believes 6 shots were fired. And 1
so there's a slight discrepancy between whether it was 6 or 9 shots that were fired. Yes. And so Wayne Collins, how did Wayne Collins end up being arrested? Do they recover the gun? Does he admit to it?
No, they never recovered the gun. They never recovered the gun. He never admitted to it. He was arrested, I think. I'm not quite sure how he was arrested, because I'm only dealing with Mark. I'm only fighting for Mark. I'm not fighting for Tony and Wayne. So I'm not quite sure. But it came up, his name came up, he was arrested, and then Tony was arrested.
Okay. And do either Tony or Wayne, have either Tony or Wayne given any evidence and said that Mark was part of it?
No, never. And we do have some new information from one of them that I can't go into at the moment. It's with the CCRC, that states Mark has nothing to do with it whatsoever. He had no knowledge of it. Because he didn't. If you look at all the phone evidence, there is no connection between Mark and Tony or Mark and Wayne, apart from that one 7-minute call the night before.
Okay.
That is it. And as I say, they'd already tried to get him there earlier that day. If they'd got the victim there earlier that day, we can only have a strong supposition that it would have happened earlier.
How do you know, given that Tony and Wayne are not talking, how do you know that there was an attempt to try and shoot him earlier on in the day?
I don't know if there was an attempt to shoot him. There was an attempt to bring him to the scene. The cell mask, the cell mask show it. The call log show it. The call log show show Mark and Wayne at the murder scene the day before. Their call log. First, Tony is calling Wayne several times. Wayne is somewhere else. He then joins Tony at the murder scene. They then call Mark Treddinik, which is also backed up by a statement from Mark Treddinik's girlfriend that said they called him and asked him to go that night, and he was busy, so they arranged it for the next day. So they arranged it for the next day before Mark had even phoned Wayne.
So
already arranged.
Cell site puts Wayne at the scene of the crime, does it?
Yes, and Tony, yes.
And Tony was there as well, so they were both there, were they? And Wayne pulled the trigger. Is that the view?
Yes, I don't think Tony wasn't on the actual scene of the shooting. I believe he was, somewhere, but in the area. But Wayne.
So what connects Mark Osborne to both of them is a phone call that happened the night before, and on that basis, is that the strength of the evidence against him? Seems very weak. Is that the strength of the evidence against him?
But honestly, I can give you the paperwork to read, Mark. The only evidence against him, as I say, is the cellmate saying what I told you he said, the call, and that's it. The prosecution actually took 6 months to charge Mark. They kept refusing. And then on the final day before they did charge him, the police took the main cell witness and they debriefed him. We've never been disclosed what that debriefing was. When in the next day when they interviewed the cell witness, they said to him, "Is Mark Osborne to do with this?" And he said yes. And they said, "How do you know that?" And he said, because he had to put Tony and Wayne in touch with each other. Again, call logs prove that Wayne and Tony got in touch with each other and Mark had no contact with them. So Mark did not instigate that contact. There is no other evidence.
So Tony and Wayne were already in contact with each other anyway.
Yeah. Yes. And they say that they said that Tony and Mark dealt drugs together and it was a drugs debt. And yet I have documentation that says police intelligence could find no evidence of Mark dealing drugs with Tony. There was another man named as Tony's partner in the trial. And Tony also had businesses, houses, cars. Mark was sleeping on a settee and had £5 in the bank. Nothing, there is nothing to indicate Mark's guilt in this at all.
Okay, so I mean, it throws up loads of questions, but let me just keep asking you a few more. So in relation to the crime scene, you talk in terms of one expert saying 6 bullets, another saying 9. Presumably they recovered some of the lugs and some of the casings at the scene. What did that tell them? There
were 6 casings, empty cases found, and 1 live. So again, 6 and 1 live.
Okay, so 1 live that had been ejected out of the gun. Okay, so that's 7.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So, and in terms of the communication that happened between them all on the night before, you say you've got this new piece of information that's gone to the CCRC, and it may well have come from either Tony or Wayne. But why now? Why wasn't that information given years ago?
Well, you have to understand something. They was very young at the time. Tony was young. He had a young son. Wayne's just Wayne. And Tony was very scared. Tony knew he was looking at Mark, and Tony couldn't. You have to understand, the other 2 couldn't clear Mark without admitting their guilt, because if they'd said Mark was nothing to do with this, it was us, they would have had to admit their guilt, and they was fighting for their lives.
Okay, so one of them now in jail is basically admitted that it did take place and that Mark wasn't responsible.
Yes, and I have a recording of that conversation, as well as we also had a statement. an official
Right.
statement.
So that's gone to the CCRC on the basis that either Tony or Wayne are now admitting to the crime and saying that Mark had nothing to do with it.
Yes, and also, as I say, I've gone to disputing the 10, because obviously all evidence points to 6. Another thing that, you know, the gun
Tell me
was
why
supposed to have said.
tell me why that is relevant, because of the alleged cell confession evidence.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And
yes,
that
the 10 bullets were used to.
Yeah, that
10 bullets were used to. Sorry, go on.
No, sorry, we keep talking. So that cell confession evidence is that the individual says that Mark Osborne told him that it was 10 rounds rather than the 6 or 9 that it actually was.
Yes, but they used the 10. To me, they adapted what was there to compound their cellmate's reliability, because he was known as unreliable. He had 13 aliases and 9 different dates of birth, and he was a known liar. And they used it and the only thing they used was 9 track wounds. Track wounds are not an indication of how many bullets were fired. I have read a million articles written by pathologists, pathology professors, and things, and I cannot find not one article that states track wounds are a good indication.
What was the contact with Tony and Wayne with Mark Osborne after the murder? What contact did they have with him after the murder?
So Mark had none with Tony. Wayne, I think he had contact with, because they was acquaintances outside of jail. You know, they was friends outside of jail.
And those telephone